In the summer of 1966, Holland-Dozier-Holland summoned the Four Tops to Hitsville, USA, and played them a song they had been writing for one specific voice. The song opened with a scream, not a musical introduction, a scream, a man calling out from a place beyond ordinary vocal register, an urgent sound that had to arrive before the words could, because the words alone were not enough to carry what the song needed to carry. Levi Stubbs looked at the sheet music. Then he put it face down on the piano. Gene Crawford was 25 years old and had been an assistant recording engineer at Hitsville USA for 2 years when the Four Tops came in for the session that produced "Reach Out, I'll Be There." He was from Detroit, had grown up in the same general world as many of the musicians he now recorded, had heard the Motown sound developing around him, had taken the engineering job because it put him inside the process rather than outside it. He had been in the room for sessions that had produced significant recordings. He was about to be in the room for something different. Levi Stubbs was born on June 6, 1936, in Detroit, Michigan. His given name was Levi Banks. He took his mother's maiden name, Stubbs, as his performing name when the Four Tops began their career. He had grown up in the east side of Detroit, which was, in the 1942nd and 1952nd, the specific neighborhood of the black Detroit that the music would eventually come from. The churches, the clubs, the high school choruses and amateur shows and informal performances that constituted the earliest training of a generation of singers who would define American popular music for the next 30 years. He had known the other 3 members of the Four Tops, Abdul Duke Fakir, Lawrence Payton, and Ronaldo Obi Benson, since high school. They had been performing together since 1954. Which meant that by the time they signed with Motown in 1963, they had been a group for 9 years, had developed the specific internal communication of 4 people who have spent nearly a decade in rooms together working on the same thing. Most vocal groups do not survive 9 years of working without a hit record. The Four Tops had. They signed with Motown in 1963, a full decade after forming. Their first significant commercial success came in 1964 with "Baby, I Need Your Loving," a record that introduced Levi Stubbs' voice to a mass audience and demonstrated immediately what was different about it. He did not have a smooth voice. He had a voice with urgency built into its structure. Not a quality that could be added through interpretation or production, but something that was present at the bass line, in the way the sound was produced, the specific physical tension of a voice that has been communicating necessity for a very long time. "I Can't Help Myself," Sugar Pie Honey Bunch, in 1965 went to number 1. It's the same old song, "Something About You." Each record placing Levi's voice at the center of an arrangement built to support what the voice needed to do, which was not merely to sing, but to reach, to transmit something from the performer to the listener across whatever distance existed between them. Holland-Dozier-Holland had been studying what Levi Stubbs' voice could do. Brian Holland, Lamont Dozier, and Eddie Holland were the most productive songwriting and production team in Motown's history, responsible for hit records for the Supremes, the Four Tops, Marvin Gaye, Martha and the Vandellas, the central architects of what the Motown sound became in its commercial peak years. They had learned, through the sessions they had produced, what each voice they worked with could sustain, and what it could exceed, and where those limits were. With Levi Stubbs, they believed there was something they hadn't yet asked for, something at the top end of what the voice could carry. They wrote, "Reach Out, I'll Be There," to find out if they were right. The song began with a scream. It was written that way, not as a warm-up, not as an entry point, but as the opening statement. A human voice at the full extension of its range and its emotional capacity, calling out before the words existed, before the arrangement arrived. The pure sound of urgency with nothing beneath it yet to land on. Gene was in the control room when the four tops arrived for the session. He saw them come in through the glass, Levi and the three others, the specific movement of four people who have been moving together for 12 years. He watched them set up. He watched Lamont Dozier sit at the studio piano and play through the song. He watched Levi receive the sheet music. Levi Stubbs held the sheet music for about 30 seconds. Gene could see him through the glass, looking at the page, running his eyes across it, doing whatever a singer does when they first see a song that is asking more from them than they have been asked for before. Then Levi placed the sheet music face down on the piano lid. He looked at Lamont Dozier. He said something that Gene, through the glass, could not hear. He learned later from one of the other musicians what was said. Levi had said, "Let me hear you play it one more time. I need to hear what it's asking." Dozier played it. Levi stood at the microphone and listened. His eyes were closed. He was not singing along. He was listening the way a person listens when they are trying to understand not what something is, but what it costs. Then he said, "Okay, let's go." The first take of "Reach Out, I'll Be There" began with the scream. Gene heard it through the monitor speakers in the control room and had the immediate physical response that a sound at that level produces when it arrives without preparation. A response in the chest, a response in the attention, the specific involuntary recognition of something happening that exceeds the ordinary range of what the ears expect to receive. The scream was not a performance choice. It was what came out when Levi Stubbs opened his mouth and gave the song what the song was asking for. The control room went quiet. The engineer, the senior engineer, not Gene, who was assisting, had both hands flat on the console. He didn't move. The producer was at the window, looking through the glass at Levi, and then looking down at the console, and then looking back up. The song ran through its first take without a stop. When it ended, the room was still for a moment. Then the producer leaned into the talkback microphone and said, "I need one more. I want to make sure we have it." Levi Stubbs said from the studio floor, "You have it." They ran one more take. It was as strong as the first. "Reach Out, I'll Be There" was released in August of 1966. It reached #1 on both the pop and R&B charts. It was the Four Tops' second #1 pop single, and the record that critics and musicians, then and since, have most often pointed to when identifying what Levi Stubbs's voice was capable of at its full extension. The scream at the opening has been analyzed and admired in music production circles for decades. Its pitch, its duration, its emotional accuracy, the way it frames everything that follows. The Four Tops remained together with the same four members for 44 years, from 1954 until Lawrence Payton's death in 1997. Levi Stubbs continued singing with the group until a stroke in 2000 prevented him from performing. He died on October 17, 2008, in Detroit. He was 72 years old. Gene Crawford spent 20 years at Motown before leaving to work in music production on the West Coast. He was in the room for several hundred sessions over those 20 years. He said that what he heard through the monitor speakers on the day the Four Tops recorded "Reach Out, I'll Be There" was the single most visceral sound he encountered in 20 years of recording work. He said, "I have been in rooms with great voices. I have heard voices that made me stop what I was doing. But a scream, a real scream, a voice at the top of what it can do and still staying in pitch, still staying musical, still carrying the lyric, is different from anything else. It's not a vocal technique. It's a decision. You decide to give everything, and you open your mouth, and you find out if everything is there." Levi Stubbs found out. It was there. Not the #1 record, not the 44 years. The moment a man put the sheet music face down on the piano, listened to the song one more time with his eyes closed, said, "Okay," and opened his mouth. Subscribe to Untold Soul Legends. Every week, we find the moments behind the music that changed everything. The comment section is open. Tell us which soul legend story you want to hear next. If this one stayed with you, share it with someone who needed to hear it today.